Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes? First of all, thank you so much for making the trip here to Google Next, and in the last room here, few, telco aficionados we have here. My name is Gabriele di Piazza. I'm a director of product management here at Google Cloud, and I manage the telecommunication products. And I will be joined on stage by Jochen from Deutsche Telekom. We'll introduce him later. He's a partner. Our teams have been working together for quite some time. And I'd like to cover some topics today. So what we'll do, I'll give you a bit of an intro on how we are thinking our portfolio, how we believe cloud can help telecommunication companies. And then we switch to a panel with Jochen. So we have the opportunity to discuss some of the aspect collaboration, and especially their thinking of Deutsche Telekom as a major provider in major operator in general. So let me get going. As I said, so what's the pulse of the industry, and what are we doing in telecom? I like to start from an interesting picture, because we keep talking about this over and over and over and over again. And many things are changing, but many things are not changing, right? So telecommunication industry has obviously experienced a relatively modest growth. There are a lot of exceptions, but if you look at this picture and the next year, it's interesting that despite this growth, every carrier around the world is experiencing a massive wave of CapEx investment. I would argue that the investment carriers have to undergo, whether it's in CapEx infrastructure, spectrum acquisition, is probably one of the largest one. And I would say probably that the wave of not just 5G is creating almost an epochal moment in investment in this space. This is actually ranging not just from a 5G mobility, but it ranges from fiber rollout of fixed wireless access. So there's a massive spend there. But if we look at what's actually happening on the demand side, we keep working with carriers, and as we're working deeply into their network build out, we start to size their data growth and data demand, both from an analytics, but also from a consumer perspective and enterprise perspective. So data is starting to potentially double every couple of years. And it's even difficult to even size networks as you start to have higher speeds. And so what's interesting, though, is that the customer experience angle, it's something also very interesting. So look at this picture as a whole. You have incredible pressure on revenue and spend. At the same time, there is an amazing drive to increase customer satisfaction. And so I think carriers are finding themselves as a topical moment right now, and not a coincidence. There's a lot of activities even here at Google Next, because we actually believe that cloud in general and cloud players can play a very important role in this transformation. And I like to discuss a little bit how Google Cloud brings to this picture. So cloud starts to become a catalyst for this transformation. So if you start to see the ability to think of creating new revenue or new revenue streams, this is one of the biggest topics in the market right now. How do I create revenue streams in a 5G market? Edge computing, AI/ML, services, transforming offers from connectivity to value-added services. Expand, transform, and operate the network. Create new end-to-end customer experiences. We start to see some of the most innovative operators around the world not thinking anymore as themselves as operators. And everybody talks about the usual telco to techco, but in reality you actually start to look at where the pool of interest is in finance, in banking, in entertainment. And so many of these players are actually transforming themselves to become not just a participant, but a catalyst to this more and more fully integrated value chain. And of course, there's an aspect of simplifying business processes. I think you probably all have been at the keynote yesterday and understood how there's a massive transformation in how applications will be deployed, developed, collaboration, AI is infused everywhere, right? We actually believe that Google Cloud has a massive set of capabilities, both from a cloud infrastructure, data analytics, security, and collaboration aspects. So think about cloud. Cloud is actually not a novelty in telco. So we worked recently with Omnia, one of our partners, Analysis Mason, one of our partners. You actually start to see an incredible set of cloud presence in the carrier market, right? So 64% of CSPs have actually applied cloud to all aspects of their business by 2024. And what I mean by that, you start to see some of these stats here. OSS and BSS transformation is something that actually started to happen probably more than 3-4 years ago, right? Application to SaaS models, use of AI, ML, analytics, I think is probably one of the largest items that we are monitoring, which is actually transforming from an on-prem usage to a cloud-based usage. And this is actually happening across the board, every region, every country, and every carrier. Migration of B2B apps, cloud-based networks, enterprise edge cloud. So if you see this picture, and if you keep thinking of what we thought a couple of years ago, cloud has made an incredible step forward, and it's actually kind of entrenched in many of the core areas in telecoms, not just networks, can be IT, can be care, any other aspect of B2B and B2C line of business type of offerings. So what are we doing here? You heard probably many sessions by yesterday. This is our very standard Google Cloud. We have, somebody this morning was asking me, can you please summarize all the announcements from Google Next to send to our customers? And I thought a little bit about it. Maybe I just woke up and I said, look, it's just impossible to summarize all these announcements because yesterday you heard many of them, and actually you probably heard only a subset of them. But we tend to look at our presence in 4 major areas. There's a data and AI cloud, many examples yesterday. Modern infrastructure cloud, anything that happens from hosting applications and transforming applications. Collaboration cloud, what you do workspace, and of course security cloud with major assets in cyber and so forth. So this is really the horizontal aspect where carriers rely on us. And I can tell you telecoms is one of the fastest growing verticals, probably the fastest growing verticals here at Google Cloud. And then, so we started to put it in together to, first of all, start to look at what do we actually need to do to make sure our core products are telco grade from security, privacy, performance, sovereignty perspective. We work in every region, every country around the world, and we cannot assume that standard IT applications are basically following the same pattern in a telecommunication, either network or OSS or BSS and so forth. So we actually worked across the core groups to make sure that we have hardening across the board. Obviously, we chose a partner approach. Partner ecosystem, we could not be a big player without the partner ecosystem. You saw the last slide from Thomas yesterday where, there was like, I don't know how many thousands of partners coming up. And, I'm glad to see many, familiar faces here of our top partners here. And then that's my, responsibility. On top of our horizontal portfolio, how can we actually build a set of telco-specific products and solutions to address some core areas. Number one is AI transformation across the board. This might be around building personalized experiences, transforming the operations, network and IT operations, building productivity in creating new offers and so forth. I think you probably heard many, many stories about AI yesterday. You can apply this. It's impossible to discuss about one AI use case in telecom. I think it actually cuts across everything. Second aspect is network modernization. Major transformation happening, virtualization to cloud, cloud to edge, automation across the board, and network which starts to be a combination of public cloud, hybrid, and on-prem network. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Major focus here. And obviously, how do we partner with carriers to help them in a monetization aspect? We cannot just be a supplier of technology, but if you think of Google and Alphabet in general, and the different assets that we have, how can we actually build strategies and products jointly with carriers in a B2B and a B2B fashion to take them to market? How to create new revenue streams? How to simplify customer acquisition? I'll give you an example later of a product that we just launched recently. How can we do joint go-to-market? I can tell you that operators across the world are becoming one of the largest go-to-market partner for Google Cloud. Obviously, we reach only a certain amount of enterprise customers and consumer customers. Operators become an accelerator for us. And I think this is especially important for us because this creates really a business relationship, not a supplier relationship. And many of these relationships basically end up being very strategic in nature. And what are we doing from a product side? So my focus here has been to focus on core areas. How do we build a hybrid telco cloud infrastructure? This is probably the first focus that we started working on 3 years ago. We believe the network will be hybrid in nature. We introduced core products such as Google Distributed Cloud as an example to make sure that we would bring the cloud infrastructure from Google on-premise with the right performance, acceleration, and characteristics. And this was by design a core investment that we made. Interesting, this was a brand new product that was actually thought starting from the telecommunications industry. But then interesting enough, as you probably saw from the keynote event yesterday, it's applicable to many, many other markets. Second aspect is we believe there's a major gap in the automation of how a network evolves. And we want to infuse our knowledge and research and investment of many, many years from having built not just Kubernetes platforms, but also having built the largest network in the world, where we basically manage our Google Global Network in a fully intent-driven, declarative approach. And so this is another area that we are focusing on. And something new I like to cover today, network planning is also taking a new turn in this moment. And I want to show you a couple of assets that we have in terms of how can we use the power of Google, including Google Maps and geospatial intelligence in helping through the planning process. And last but not least, how can we help on the customer experience side? Think of combining the ability to understand customer usage from Android phones on one side to being able to partner with data, for example, with Google Marketing Platform, Google Marketing Assets. So combining these things together would bring the opportunity to actually create a set of campaigns for new customer acquisition, upsell, cross-sell, retention, and so forth. And so a couple of examples. I talked about the network, and we have been on a path, as I mentioned. We needed to bring a high-performance solution to run this network, and that's where we actually started, a couple of years ago. But now we are on a path of adding the same type of functionality across Google Cloud, as well as on-premise capability, and adding layers of automation and a data analytics foundation. We actually believe there won't be any network in the future that will not span across those 3 layers. And obviously, what we're looking for the future is, we've been talking for a while about a cloud-native network, but the reality is that we start to lay the foundation for what we call an AI-native network. If you start to see from the demos yesterday, ability to potentially predict and describe where application could run, how you could describe some of the network intent, moving from a reactive to proactive type of issue isolation and so forth. So this is a huge area of I think, research. I think this will keep us busy for the next 5 to 10 years. And a couple of other examples. I mentioned geospatial intelligence. So if you think of the assets that Google brings to market, we have probably the more calibrated models in terms of every time you open up Google Maps, you see a blue dot, so 3 billion of pings every second. So we look at propagation, we look at understanding assets, and we believe these are a set of assets that we have not exposed to the telecommunication world. But these are assets that can be played across mobile networks to fixed networks. And we'll have a chance to discuss it a little bit later with Jochen as well. And I mentioned subscriber insights. Imagine now combining Google's data analytics capabilities, tapping into customer usage, understanding consumption, combined with the ability to do demographics and targeting using Google marketing and potentially targeted campaigns, but also close the loop instantly and activate data plans through either Android phones or iPhones. So this is not just about an offline analytics capability, but the ability to actually bring these capabilities all together. So these are just a few examples that I wanted to touch on. And then the last slide, I promise. I like to think of Google not just as another hyperscaler. If you think of each one of our products in Telecom, we are tapping into an incredible amount of assets in Alphabet, Google Alphabet. I mentioned Google Distributed Cloud. We are using the same exact lifecycle management, fleet management, provisioning, automation software that we use in 4,000 plus locations in the YouTube network. And so this is an example of how we tapped into this type of research. Telecom Network automation, all the intent-driven design is something that we've been using in Google Global Network for the last 10 plus years. Planning, I was just showing you some of the assets that we basically can leverage from our geo-mapping and Google Maps team. Telecom subscriber insights, again, tapping into Google marketing, tapping into Android. So what I'm trying to communicate here is that when we start to build products, we are trying to build the next powerful compute platform and so forth, but we actually think, what is really differentiated about Google that other hyperscalers cannot bring to market. And so we really like to think of this as either leveraging technology that we have built from a planet scale infrastructure, but also how can we leverage enterprise and consumer assets to build effective go-to-market products that can actually help telco with top revenue streams. So with this, I'd like to invite Jochen here on stage. Please welcome him. And Jochen is Vice President for Network Automation in Deutsche Telekom. And you can see there. Jochen, why don't you maybe give us a bit of an intro of yourself, and I think we also have a slide about who Deutsche Telekom is. It shouldn't be a need of, presenting them, but maybe, please go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, first of all, thanks, Gabriele, for introducing me and the kind welcome here. I'm really honored to be here. It's a pleasure amongst all this competence. It's very impressive to be here on this conference, I can say. For those of you who are not familiar with Deutsche Telekom, I compiled a couple of key facts, maybe just a quick overview. Deutsche Telekom is one of the world's largest telecommunication companies with presence in more than 50 countries. By revenue, we are Europe's largest telecommunications company. And I won't read out all these facts to you, but one of the things that is important to understand also for this discussion, I think, is that we embarked on a journey, what we call the digital telco transformation. So our ambition is to become the world's leading digital telco. And a lot of what we will be discussing today has to do exactly with that target. My personal responsibility is I run the group's network automation program. In that program, we are focused on defining and driving key enablers for automating our networking processes along the entire value chain of planning, building, and operating networks. Of course, with the goal, basically with three major goals: to increase speed, to increase efficiency, and of course also to, at the same time, to increase customer experience. So,
yeah. Oh, great. And I was impressed, Jochen, but thanks to the relationship, that we announced a year over ago, is that getting closer to Deutsche Telekom, their brand is one of the highest brand in Europe. It's very interesting. So because I think they're actually able to project an incredible brand of innovation and so forth. So I'd like to start. Obviously, I had to do it. I'm in a cloud provider, right? So, but we think that cloud is relevant for all the aspects that I talked about. There's an aspect of CapEx, OpEx pressure. There's an aspect of supporting build out of new services, transition of network, analytics. So, what are your thoughts? I mean, how do you see cloud becoming part of building the Deutsche Telekom network and services?
So, very good question. First of all, as it pertains to my own field of activity, the network automation, I think one of the things we do there is we leverage a lot of knowledge and capabilities, practices that have been built in the cloud world over the last many years, of the last decades, basically, and apply them to our network operating processes. And as I mentioned, this initiative, the program around leading digital telco, we are in the middle of implementing that. And when it comes to cloud, the key thing to understand is what we set out to do is basically breaking the classical vertically integrated operating model of our network services up and transforming that into a horizontal cloud-based model. And many of the architectural paradigms in that cloud architecture are probably not new to this audience at all. So if you would look in it, you would find that it has to do with basically breaking up tightly coupled software architectures and creating network capabilities exposed by APIs, machine consumable APIs, which is a prerequisite for automation, right? But then, other than the runtime, we also, and that is something my team and I were driving over the last 2 years very intensely, we are also looking into how actually people work with those environments. And there we set up a program around the network lifecycle management by harmonizing on a common CI/CD tool chain for our entire network operations across at least the European footprint so far. And that will enable us, of course, to do the shift-left approach, by bringing much more security control points, quality checks, testing very early on in the life cycle. So that is one area where we have been focusing on over the last 18 months to implement. On the way forward, things we are currently driving are a common, I would call, network data architecture, basically an entire layered architecture that helps to free up data from tech silos and making it available across the organization, not just technology, but also outside the technology organization, to be consumable as products by all sorts of analytics applications, real-time, non-real-time analytics. And of course, on top of that, to do this analytics, obviously we would need an MLOps layer to be able to, with repositories, with ML pipelines, to be able to drive this in a actually industrialized way, if you will. So those are the key, I would say those are key elements of this transformation we currently do with cloud. And we already see the effects, the positive effects of that in areas where we already went through this transformation. So lifecycle area per lifecycle area, we go through that transformation journey, and we already see in the areas where we applied it really, really good effects, be it radically reduced cycle times for releases, at the same time reduced change failure rates, but also significantly increased efficiency for the teams working with those tool landscapes.
Yeah, so I like what you describe as shift left, right? Because this is, I think the more we work with operators in this last couple of years, I'm surprised myself about the change in mindset, because this way of thinking is starting to actually be ingrained, as opposed to, keep adding additional system. I think I found that this is a moment where there's also a company-wide thinking about unified data platforms, unified automation, responsible for unified CI/CD pipelines. And then we show up and we think we know a lot as hyperscaler software company and so forth, but actually Telecom has already undergone this process. Yeah. And so we need to make sure that we keep innovating there, right? Yeah. So in general, so if you think of cloud, same question I would pose about analytics. It's in the subject, in the title of our presentation here. And analytics is not a new thing in the telecoms. It's been there for quite some time. But I actually think it is also at one of those moments where analytics play a key role. What are you thinking about? So how do you see analytics play in this market, right?
So it's obviously a vast field. I can't think of any process in our value chain that won't be affected by, or is not, or will not be affected by analytics in some data-driven analytics in some way. The most obvious one I described when we look into the classical type of network operations contributing ultimately to customer experience. I want to be able to do anomaly detection. I want to be able, when things go wrong, to understand where the root cause is. So data-driven approaches, ML/AI approaches to understand very fast where the root cause is of course activities or areas where we look into what we implement. And ultimately, the ultimate goal will be to even predict failures or incidents before they actually impact the customer. So that's the holy grail, I would say, of what we are trying to accomplish, to catch those incidents early on, to make sure nothing impacts the customer. But other than that, I think that is a focus area that cloud operators have been looking in for probably also decades. Now, and by the way, also our today's network operation with our vendors, they bring with them analytics based on data in the stack to be able to assure the system, the stability, etc. So that is nothing new. But then if you look at another area, which is quite interesting from a addressable spend potential and from an efficiency potential, something that is easily overlooked is the plan and build process, right? So as part of that leading digital telco strategy, we are investing heavily in network infrastructure. So of course, the CapEx allocated there and the FTE, the OpEx allocated there, there's a huge leverage effect. If you're able to invest CapEx more smartly, if you're able to squeeze out percentage points in workforce efficiency for those processes to build those networks. So this is why, for instance, in Germany a couple of years ago, we already invested in ML-based image recognition for roads to be able to accelerate and make more accurate our fiber planning process. And with you guys right now in our POC, we are trying to even increase this accuracy and increase the speed of that even more by consuming geo-intelligence via APIs in the long run. So those are ideas, those are things we do together as part of our extended innovation partnership.
Yeah, and I think analytics is one of those topics that never stops of finding new use cases.
Absolutely.
So if you look back at the partnership, the relationship, we've made different announcements, we've been working with them. What was interesting for me is that we're working on different tiers. With Deutsche Telekom, we work with existing products, future products, innovation, and so forth. Maybe take us through some of the experience and some of the milestones that we've been working together, just to get a feeling of different things. Yeah.
So one area which you are very aware of, which is not my personal area of responsibility, but where we in the partnership Deutsche Telekom and Google reached a significant milestone earlier this year, was the deployment of a 5G core on a GDC on-premise. So with that, we could show that deployment times of core functions, we could accelerate, bringing deployment times down to basically moments. Yeah? So that is something that has been already achieved by beginning of the year. In our and regarding this, I think looking forward, it is very important that we invest in, I would say, as part of that partnership, in creating industry blueprints, yeah, for simplifying this type of workload deployment and operation to make it scalable, yeah, to deploy it at scale later on. So that is one area where I think achievements are there and where the potential is for harmonization and bringing automation and these types of things at scale into telco.
Yeah. And lots of learnings on our side, by the way, because we are Google is a technology company, fantastic engineering, but then has been in this journey. We actually that's what was interesting for us, having a joint journey where we could actually understand the needs. It's not just a piece of technology, but it's the part of operation, the aspect of sovereignty, the aspect of security, and so forth. It was great learning from us.
Yeah. On the second thing, on the road surface recognition, on the geo-intelligence, I have to be a bit cautious here, but we are in the process, we are in the POC, we will have early indications by September timeframe, which is soon. But I can say that early steps look quite promising. So we are looking into, of course, comparing the API-based geoanalytics with the accuracy of the ground truth data we have from our current solution. So here, first indications look quite promising. So I'm quite positive on that end. And one of the things I think where the entire industry, and not our partnership in particular, but the industry at large, where I feel there's a lot of potential, is applying these sort of geo-intelligence solutions to a variety of processes, especially labor and capital intense processes in deploying networks, servicing networks. All of those will depend on correct asset data. Also, those things will benefit from having geo-intelligence data and asset intelligence data available basically at your fingertip, yeah? As opposed to what we do today. We send out cars, we collect our own pictures, our own images. If I had it via an API, why wouldn't I use it? Yeah? So that is an area of big potential for radio planning, for fiber planning, for service processes. And I think it is also correct asset inventory data, I would say, lays the ground for everything around that big topic of digital twin. Yeah. Without, what is it? Without a correct asset inventory, you can't, you shouldn't basically talk about digital twin if you don't get the basics right. So I think that's the nearest area where I see potential. And
But by the way, without getting ahead of ourselves, but we do see a lot of applicability to many other industries as well.
Of course.
Because obviously, whenever you discuss, radio planning is a very telecom specific aspect, but asset intelligence, surface build, and so forth, this is something that we believe can be applicable to energy transportation, cities, and so forth. Many others.
I think there's a lot of potential here. What a good learning is also that in these projects, it is extremely important you have the right domain experts who have the local business understanding, the context of the situation available already in the phase where you basically prepare the data for the analytics you do. That's I think, a common truth in all sorts of AI/ML projects. But the close collaboration between the domain experts and the data AI experts, I think, is absolutely essential for each individual case you do, because even on the surface they look similar. There are tiny differences that actually make the difference then in practice. So you actually need to have that strong collaboration between guys like you with a strong data and AI expertise and our domain expertise in the concrete business context.
And that's a combination of the partnership. By the way, we don't want to make it exclusive. The point is that how can we actually, many discussions with ET has been, how can we create this and make it available? Because in reality, I see an incredible amount of increased collaboration between carriers. The learnings can be applied across and so forth. That's been an interesting aspect. Even the openness in making sure that certain things could be shared. So thank you so much, and thank you again for your
Thanks for having me.